one of the most easy GIS sites. If we had a little more time, I would show you, but it's pretty intuitive. When you pull it up and open that page up, you got buttons on there. Really, the only two you need are the pan button, so you can move the map around, the zoom in button, and then the identify property button. So when you click on something, it tells you who owns that piece of property, and the map's really beautiful. It shows you the parcels of property and outlines them. That's a really neat way to, like, if you're looking around your town and you're like, I wonder who owns that woods, that kind of unkempt area over there. A lot of times it can be owned by the city and they just haven't developed it. And it makes a great cache hiding place because you don't need special permission or anything. Good question, cemeteries. Most all cemeteries do not require special permission unless it's the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. They tend not to like caches in their cemeteries anymore. I should say the Catholic Archdiocese. So you may have to talk to someone about getting special permission for that. I will tell you this, if you have any questions about who owns it or not, just put the cache in for publication. The reviewer will kick it back to you if they have a problem with who owns that property or there's an issue. And then at that point you can figure out who you need to talk to or whatever. So don't stress about it too much. You know, you can do it that way indirectly as well. If you don't want to do the GIS, you're like, boy, this all sounds a little overwhelming. Just put the cache in for publication and see what happens. Little tricks. Go ahead.
People on that GIS website, you find out that little space of public land there is owned by the city. Where do you go to get permission?
So the question is, once you find out who owns that piece of property that you're looking for, and let's say the city owns it, you don't need any special permission unless your special permission cases are the DNR properties, Waukesha County Parks and Trails, Milwaukee County Parks and Trails. Everything else is just fair game, doesn't require any special permission. Yeah, sure. This is one of the most important tips. We're going to go through general tips on how Martin and I, when you do a good quality cache. So most people, when it comes to taking coordinates for a cache, you know, accuracy can really vary a lot. You guys have all found caches where the coordinates are right on, or they're like 60 feet off, and you're like, well, what the heck happened there? What did they do? Well, cache hider was well-intentioned on hiding the cache well. But I find most of the time they don't know how to average coordinates. And on your GPS, most all GPSs have a button, you know, that you can mark the coordinates where you're standing at, right? And that's so, it takes a quick snapshot from the satellites of where you are. That's not necessarily that accurate, especially if you're standing under trees. Well, on your GPS menu right there, along with the mark button, should probably be one that says average. And you're gonna wanna like enter, select average, and what I mean by averaging 100 times is basically the GPS is taking about every 2 seconds, it's taking a repetitive chord snapshot again, and it's averaging them with the last ones. You do that 100 times in a row, and you're holding your GPS out in front of you like this, or above your head, which is what I do. I hold it above my head because I don't want to interfere with any of the satellite receptions 360 degrees over my head. A lot of people will stand here like this too and take their cords at their chest. Well, you're losing probably at least half the satellites because they're behind you and your body's blocking those fixes on those satellites. So hold it up in front of you flat or above your head like I do for a couple minutes. And then even if you're under trees, I guarantee you'll probably be within 6 feet and people will be awed at you. They'll say, how did you get those so accurate? There's so many big trees, and I walked right up to the cache and the cords because they did the averaging. Little tricks. The 6-foot rule. This is very straightforward, but it's very helpful. So when you look at coordinates, each minute is equal to 6 feet. So that's the last place on your coordinate measurement, of course. What I often do is, like, if that column right there is a tree, I know if I try to do averaging right next to that tree's going to be blocking a lot of the satellite reception. So what I will do is I'll stand right here and take my coordinates. And I'll try to make that tree directly east or west of me or north or south. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take my coordinates here and I'm like, I'm 18 feet away. Okay, I got an exact measurement here. I know I'm under the tree. The satellite reception is perfect. And then once I hit okay, I want that, then I'll go in and go to that chord measurement, and then I'm going to basically, what I'm going to do is I know I'm 18 feet away from that tree. I'm going to bump my coordinates 0.003. .003 in the direction I want to go, and then my coordinates will be exactly on the base of that tree, which you can't do if you're actually standing next to that tree. Does that make sense? So you can also use this 6-foot rule if you're like in, let's say, Google Maps, Google Satellite, I mean. And so when you get home, you kind of look at you put in your coordinates in Google because you want to see how accurate you were. And Google Maps, Google Earth, are very accurate, by the way. So if you put your coordinates into there, and this works better in urban areas than areas where there aren't so much stuff or in the woods, because you have to be able to see a landmark, right, to know where you're at. So it's very easy once you see where you're at on the Google satellite to then tweak your coordinates at home. You put it in, you see, I'm like about 12 feet away from that bush. I'd like to put it right on the bush. Use the 6-foot rule to manually adjust your coordinates.
I would just add just to that too. It's
The 6-foot thing is helpful too when if there's an existing cache out there and you need to be 0.10 miles, 0.10 miles away from it, you can use the maps to get exactly within 0.10 of that. It's 528 feet. So you can actually use the maps in that 6-foot thing to make sure you're that 0.10 away. If you're putting a series of caches out like Ryan and I like to do, sometimes you want to squeeze in as many as you can into an area. Like 10 caches in one part, you can use the maps to make sure everything is 0.10 away, and that the 6-foot thing is really helpful for doing that.
Yeah, so when you go and hide a cache, you should obviously bring your GPS along, you'll have it along, but upload all the caches around that cache, even the ones you found, obviously, because you want those in your GPS. Because it's going to be very easy when you want to see what your proximity is to other caches. The easiest way to do that is have all those caches in your GPS and say, okay, I think I want to hide a cache here, but I know there's one over there, and you say, go to that cache, and it says you're 476 feet away, and you're like, oh man, that's not any good. Now I got to move another 50 feet away. And then you basically do like we do. We have our GPS on and we walk away from that cache and we see where the free cache hiding radius is so we can go beyond that point. It's pretty simple, but a lot of people don't realize that it's that simple to do that.
Will it actually take to get approved a .11? I thought somebody gave them the idea that if you're .1, it will still consider that within the...
Yeah, the question is how far beyond 528 feet or .1 do you have to get it approved? At 528 feet, because I've done it before. I go to 528 and when which is equal to .1 mile or 1 city block in theory, you're good. As soon as you go to 529 feet, you're good as gold. Attributes, little tricks. We're just so obviously, you have all those little attributes on all the pages. The most important one is it winter friendly or not? Because if someone tells you it's winter friendly, well, they just helped you find the cache much faster because you know it's on the ground. How hard is that? When you hide a cache that's more interesting or creative, you might want to not put that winter friendly cache. You don't have to use the attributes or tell people things necessarily. But then that makes it so that you probably need to make the cache harder, especially if it's a challenging one or something like that. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to use the winter friendly or not. And then that keeps people guessing and they're not sure. Power lines, I have a cache in Waukesha that's under a power line set exactly like that. And the more power, the more electromagnetic radiation, the worse your satellite reception is going to be. Even though I tweaked my coordinates with Google Satellite right on the train and the steps under the barbershop train, some people think it's way across the street and ask me, your coordinates are really off, why did you do that? I'm like, did you look overhead? I mean, that's why. If you put it in the Google Satellite, you'll see my coordinates are right on, but it's just a matter of power lines interfering.
What do you do if you find a cache that's located on a de-energized power?
Yeah, so caches, the question is, what do you do if it's located in a place you don't think it's appropriate, like a water tower or a We Energies electrical tower? Yeah. In theory, those caches are not supposed to be approved. They're all over anyway. I noticed that a lot, like in Menominee Falls, there's one that because of the terrorism issues, there are not supposed to be caches next to bridges as well. I think the limit is 150 feet, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah. There's several areas that technically there aren't supposed to be caches. Sometimes you may submit it, and if you get the reviewer on a good day, I guess it sometimes goes through, and then other times not. So
Yeah.
that's a hard one. I try not to put ones on
Yeah.
Because it's probably not gonna go through, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, and you hate to, yeah, I totally agree with Martin in that. Think about the neighbors nearby. You don't want people thinking that the geocacher's a terrorist or causing problems at that little utility building that's a We Energies or some kind of communications building. That's, yeah, you should think about things like that. I agree, but there are lots of caches that have been published like that because you can find them all the time if you're an active geocacher. And
Are utility poles included in that?
no, utility poles typically are not included in that because I've used those before. Those are kind of benign in comparison to other structures, you know, that people could damage or yeah. I will, you can jump in anytime, Martin. I know a lot of these slides were yours here. Do you want to kind of talk about them, or I can, you know, it's up to you.
As far as your first hide, the point that I wanted to make on that is when you're first starting out, a good idea is to find enough caches first. Take your time placing your first hide. I think your first hide is important as far as setting the tone for others as far as what kind of hider you're going to be. If you start out, and I've seen this before, someone has like maybe 20 finds and they decide they want to hide something, and you know, they've maybe seen one of the 20 they found that was like really hard, so they'll take a little vial or something and just put it on the ground in the middle of nowhere. And technically it's a nice hard hide, but it does not really set a good start for you when people are out there frustrated and like, oh, it's this guy that just throws a cache on the ground in the middle of nowhere. So what you want to start out with is something quality, but not necessarily super hard. Something that they'll remember and think, oh, I remember his first hide. It was this